Today's presentation explains 4 connected ideas that shape MIKMAC harvesting in Jessica PG Ag. Treaty relationships, Section 35, UNDRIP, and nation to nation, and what they mean for fisheries, hunting, and land harvesting. First, treaty relationships are not just historical documents. They are living agreements that create ongoing obligations between the MIKMAC and the Crown. A treaty relationship is about how governments are expected to behave, through respect, good faith, and implementation of promises. In our region, the Peace and Friendship Treaty framework is especially important because it is widely understood as different from land cession treaties. In other words, it is not simply about the past, it still shapes responsibilities and decision-making today. Second, Section 35 is the constitutional foundation. Section 35 of the Constitution Act, 1982 recognizes and affirms existing Aboriginal and treaty rights. This matters because it places Indigenous rights in the highest category of Canadian law. So harvesting rights are not programs or permissions. They are constitutionally protected rights that governments must take seriously. Section 35 also explains why government decision-making must meet a high legal standard when rights might be impacted, especially in areas like fisheries regulation, wildlife management, habitat protection, and land access. Third, UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, adds a strong rights-based framework that supports how Canada should interpret and implement Indigenous rights. UNDRIP emphasizes Indigenous peoples' rights to lands, territories, and resources traditionally used, and it highlights the expectation of meaningful participation in decisions that affect Indigenous peoples, often described through the principle of free, prior, and informed consent, or FPIC. In practical terms, UNDRIP strengthens the expectation that decisions about harvesting, whether in the water, on the land, or in the forest, should not be done to First Nations, but developed with First Nations through their institutions and laws. Fourth, nation to nation is the practical relationship model. It is not just a political phrase. It describes a government-to-government approach grounded in recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership. Nation to nation is what turns law into working systems, co-development of policies, shared planning tables, resourcing community capacity, and long-term agreements that support stability and clarity for everyone involved. When we connect these 4 pieces together, we get a simple operating picture. Treaty relationships explain the original commitments and the ongoing relationship. Section 35 confirms those rights and relationships are constitutionally protected. UNDRIP provides the international rights lens that strengthens how decisions should be made, especially around participation and consent. Nation to nation is the how, the governance pathway that makes implementation real. So what does this mean in day-to-day terms for fisheries, hunting, and land harvesting? It means management should move away from last-minute conflict and towards structured, collaborative systems. Co-developed rules, shared monitoring and enforcement protocols, guardians and stewardship programs, and decision-making processes that recognize the authority of the nation and the communal nature of rights. It also means resourcing matters, because rights without capacity can turn into constant crisis. Nation-to-nation work requires tables, data, community planning, and the ability to govern harvesting in a way that protects culture, conservation, and food security. The key message is this. For Jessica PG Ag, harvesting is not only an activity. It is tied to law, livelihood, culture, and stewardship. And the best outcomes happen when these 4 foundations, treaty relationships, Section 35, UNDRIP, and nation to nation, are understood as one connected system that guides respectful, practical, and sustainable decision-making.